Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Today, I thought I'd take a look at some starter pens, or pens I think that are in my collection and would be useful for someone who's fairly new to the fountain pen hobby. Now, I was going to do one video looking at all my pens, but there were so many pens that fell into this category that I'll split it into two videos. Today, we're going to take a look at pens that are from non-mainland China manufacturers. Then in the next video in this series, we'll take a look at pens from mainland China manufacturers. So join me now down on the mat and we'll take a look at the top 5 pens that I believe would be useful for people starting out in the fountain pen hobby. Welcome down to the table. So what are the 5 pens that I think would be good for a starter? This is just my opinion, remember. Your opinions may be different. I'd love to get your opinions. Drop comments down below. Let's try and build up a really good list of starter pens. So I'm going to start with the Platinum Preppy. This whole series, I'm fetching them out in increasing price order. Very nice pen. This one, I've actually eyedroppered it. When I bought it, it came with a cartridge. So it was I believe it was black ink. You can buy a converter. The converter actually costs more than the pen, but it works. So a platinum converter works in here. There's loads of threads on here. All I did was I put a little bit of silicone grease on it and I eyedropper it, which lets me get loads and loads of ink in there. It's a very light pen. It feels flimsy, but when you consider that it's just over $8 Aussie to buy one, I think they're really good value. This one has got, although the cap says it's an 03, let me just find the focus thing so I can focus that. 0.3, which is equivalent to a fine, I think, a Japanese fine. The nib on here is actually the 05. I do have a couple of these and I swapped the nibs over. I like the wider nib, which is more like a Japanese medium on this pen, whereas my other Preppy, it's a red colour, and that's the one with the fine nib on it. Let's do some writing with this pen though. So we've got here a Platinum Preppy. It's a 0.5. The price for this, so I've priced all these just before I started the video. So what I've found is I can get this for $8.50. Very cheap pen, very good value pen. The ink is by Lamy. And it's part of the Crystal series. And it's called Obsidian. I'm not sure if I would call this a black ink. Definitely a very, very dark grey, but certainly tending towards black. I'm quite happy to use this as a black. And that's why it's actually in this pen. I don't often use black ink, and having black in the Preppy or something like that, it's actually quite good value. And because I've eyedroppered it, I can usually see in this transparent body my ink level. I've been mixing it all around, which is why it's covered the whole body at the moment. But I usually have an idea of the ink, so I know if I need to replace it. Line variation, don't expect much. There's no pressure. That's with pressure. There's a little bit of softness to the nib, but it's a fairly stiff nib. So none, with, none, with, none, and with. And then we'll do a sentence, so we'll move down to the page. I think this is a nice pen. I say nib, it's fairly small, easy to swap. You just pull it off and put the next one back on. Nice width to it, doesn't feel too thin. Could do with being a little bit wider and being very picky. Nice length if you want to use your pen unposted. You can post it. Doesn't make it feel back heavy, but does add that nice little bit of extra length to it. All in all, if you're going to buy somebody a pen as their first pen, I think you'd be hard pushed to go wrong with the Platinum Preppy. So now we're going to jump in price. When I was looking at my pens, I only had this one really in the lower price in the non-China mainland. I've got loads of China mainland pens which are in this price range, but that's all going to be covered in a separate video. Let's move this ever so slightly up. So the next pen actually comes from India. The Platinum Preppy is from Japan. We're taking a bit of a world tour today. There we go. This is the Fountain Pen Revolution Darjeeling. This one is cartridge converter. So let's take this off. Loads of threads on this. So there's the cartridge converter. It came with this cartridge converter. It's not my favourite type of converter. It's the one where you have to push this down and pull it back in. But it came with one. I can't remember if it came with a cartridge. International standard cartridges, I believe. Loads of threads. You could eyedropper this. I don't. I use that converter. Same colour material all the way through. This nice red. There are different colours available. One thing we have got going for this, it's a number 6 size nib. Again, it's a steel nib. This is the nib that came with it. Quite nice. Plastic feed there. Another one fits nicely in the hand. Wool post. He says if you can get it to go on right there, yeah, posts quite nicely. I find it makes it too long, but I think unposted is a really nice length. So this is the Fountain Pen Revolution. Quite a long name, isn't it? Darjeeling. It's a medium nib. So when I bought this, it was about $30. I've gone and looked on the Fountain Pen Revolution website and I looked on the Australian version of it. You can get this pen now for 25 Aussie dollars. The ink by Pelikan. And it's Edelstein. Garnet. Garnet. See some nice shading coming through. So even though it's a fairly inexpensive, if you can call $25 inexpensive, it's a very subjective thing that. It does perform very well on the page. Line variation. There's no pressure. With pressure, not much of a difference. The nib does feel stiff. None with, and none and with. We'll move the mic for the writing sample. It's another one, feels stiff, a little bit of feedback. On the paper, this has got a slight coating to it. This is Rhodia paper. It does feel like there's a little bit of slippiness underneath the nib. I prefer a little bit more feedback, a little bit more roughness, but it's something I could fix. I don't intend to because it still writes really well. It's still nice. I have had one issue with it. That was going back about 2 years. I had it inked up during January, which is the height of our summer, and we were having a bit of a run of hot days. So we'd had about 4 or 5 days where it was over 35 centigrade, a couple of days over 40. And what I found was the nib would dry out extremely quickly. So if I was using it in the morning, if I popped the lid on, left it on my desk, by the time I got round to using it again, maybe 2-3 hours later, it was dry. I'd have to prime the feed. Don't think that's an issue with the pen. It was just hot, and it was very hot at the time. But it's something I just feel it's worth mentioning. I do like the shading we're seeing on here. We're seeing lots of different tones and colours coming through. You know, for a cheapish pen, that's quite nice. So we're going to take a little bit of a jump in price now. This is the Lamy Safari. This is a pen a lot of people talk about. A lot of people have one. It's like it's a good solid starter pen. It's made in Germany, so our world tour is continuing. I have mixed feelings about this pen. This is very light. You can feel the lightness. I have got a Lamy All-Star, which is the same shape, exactly same size, same dimensions, but it's an aluminium, so it feels a bit heavier. And I will be honest, I prefer the weight of that All-Star to the weight of the Safari. Not saying the Safari is a bad pen, it's not. It's just the weight, it just feels too light for me. The section on this, as you see, we've got this triangular grip. I actually quite like this. This is a very divisive grip. I quite like it. I hold my pens down near the bottom, and I find this grip just guides my fingers down so they're in the right position. I really like it. I think if you hold your pens higher up, the grip feels odd, but the way I hold it, yeah, it feels nice. And as I say on the All-Star, love it, much prefer it. This is a cartridge converter pen. It came with the cartridge. I had to buy the converter separately. The converter was another $10. Just be aware of that. If you're happy enough using cartridges, then you'll get away with it. But if you want a converter, factor in that price. There's a hole there, so you can actually see the ink level. So when I put this back on, it all lines up so I can see my ink level through this window. I do find it's a little bit small for me, and I struggle to see the ink levels. But it's easy enough to take the body off, and that makes it easier to see. Because of this hole there, not possible to eyedropper. So we've got here a Lamy Safari. Comes with loads of different nib options. I went for the broad. The nibs, very easy to take off. I'm not going to do it. It literally just slides off and then the new one will slide on. I went for the black colour because it goes with the rest of the pen. Now, price-wise, I've actually found quite a variety of prices for this. So to buy it in Australia, and I'm going to give that price and another price, was 52 Aussie dollars. To buy it from the UK was 40 Aussie dollars. But you've got to factor in shipping. You know, the shipping was, I think, $7 to buy it in Australia. I can't remember exactly how much it was from the UK. What I do with the UK is I bulk together a number of purchases so I get a free shipping level. But be aware, prices do vary for this pen. The ink in here is by Robert Oster. And it's called Light Green. Nice bright ink. Beauty of the colour here, this is a charcoal colour. You can use virtually any ink you want. There are loads of different colours of the Safari, and each year they fetch out some special editions. This is the only Safari I have. I say I do have an All-Star, and I can swap the nibs between them dead easy. Line variation, so there's no pressure. There's adding pressure. Stiff feeling nib, do see a little bit of a difference. Could be down to more ink being put down there. So no pressure with, none, and with. So here, see very little line variation. And we'll move the mic for the sentence. Lovely feedback on this. That's the one thing I would say. I love the way the nib writes. I love the feedback on it. Just feels too light for me. Really nice. Really interesting pen. I like the clip. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. I do like the clip being the same colour. Or this black colour offsets really well. The ink, loads of shading coming through. Loads of interest. I like ink with an interest. As we're writing, hopefully it came over on the mic. You could really hear it. There was a lot of audible feedback. And there was a nice tactile feedback, so I could feel the nib through the pen writing. Very, very nice. We're sticking with Germany for the next pen. Let me just move the page up. So the next pen is, I'll hold it that way so you can actually see the name the right way up. This is the Kaweco Sport. This is a pocket pen. It's another light pen. Very small, in the hand. It's fetching that Lamy Safari just so you can see it compared to the Safari. It's about, maybe 3/4 of the size. The beauty with the pocket pen though, the lid comes off, posts on the end, and you end up with a pen which is a very nice size. So compare that to the Safari. Now they're both roughly the same length. I will be honest, this Kaweco Sport is one of my favourite pens. Even though I've got a number of more expensive pens, this is one. If it's inked up, I do often reach for it. Unposted, I say, it's not really suitable, but posted, it feels really nice. I'd like it if the section was a bit bigger, but that's a personal choice. I just find it too thin. So in terms of ink options, let me just take this off. It comes with a cartridge. And what I've done is I keep that cartridge and I refill it with the ink that I want to use. In here now, I've got a brown ink. You can get a Kaweco converter. They're quite expensive. I think it was either $10 or $15. I do have one. Don't often use it. It doesn't take a lot of ink. The other thing you can do is you can eyedropper this. I have thought about it. Haven't done it yet because I normally just fill the cartridge. But I'd just put some silicone grease on these threads just to help it seal. And then when it's on, you'd be able to have that whole body full of ink. And because this particular one is transparent, this is, I believe it's transparent coconut, you'd be able to see the ink level. Nib on here, loads of different nib choices. I've gone for a stub on this. One of my favourite stub nibs as well. So we've got here a Kaweco. Oh, there we go. Kaweco. I can never remember what it is. I know that the word is made up from the names of the founders and it's 2 letters from each. I'm going to call this a Styline Sport. I can never remember if it's Styline or Classic. I just normally call it a Sport anyway. Got a 1.1 nib. So price-wise for this, it's another one. I've found different prices. Again, I found it for $52 buying it in Australia, or $40 to buy from the UK. Same story as with the Safari. You've got to bear in mind postage costs as well. The ink in here is by Diamine, and it's Yule log. This was part of the 2022 Ink Vent series. Nice brown ink. Got some shimmer in there, some like coppery shimmer. We'll hopefully see that in a second when I hold up to the camera. Line variation. So we've got here a stub, so got a fairly wide line going down. Let's add in some pressure. Don't see much of a difference. Going across though, just look at that line difference. So there's down, there's across. Line variation. You get loads of line variation with this. Really fetches character to my writing. We'll move the mic and write the sentence. Absolutely lovely to write with. You can hopefully see all the character coming out. You know, the way we've got the different line widths. Unlike a lot of my other stub nibs, this one doesn't seem to catch on the paper. It's nice and smooth. Again, a little teeny bit of feedback. Really enjoyable to write with. Just going to hold this up to the camera. Hopefully we'll be able to capture some of that shimmer. So here on Kaweco you can definitely see, I can see it. Whether it comes over on the camera, I don't know. But as I turn it and it catches the light, we've got the brown, then bang, we've got this like pinky, coppery shimmer coming through. So Kaweco's got it, Skyline's got it, Diamine's got it, and Yule. Not sure if I can see any on the bottom sentence though. Really nice, quite a pretty pen and ink combination. So that's my Kaweco Sport. Just dropping in to interrupt your regular programming. Would you like to help support the channel? If so, please consider joining as a member. As a member, you'll get early access to my videos. I normally upload them a couple of days before they go out, and as soon as they're uploaded, they'll be released to members. There'll also be a shout out at the end of the videos, and then as we get the members coming in, we'll actually chat among ourselves and work out what other perks, what other things you'd like me to add in. You know, would you like maybe a monthly live chat just for members? All down to us. So please, if you can, consider joining the channel. A link will be in the description down below. So the last one, I do have a couple of bonus ones, but the last one we're going to take a look at. This is from Taiwan. So it's not mainland China. That's why I'm very, very careful. These are non-mainland China pens. Taiwan, it's that grey area. Do you class it as part of Greater China or do you class it as its own? But this is the Twsbi Eco. Very good workhorse pen. If you're happy to get a piston filling pen, which means you've got to use bottle ink, this is a really good pen to start with. Very consistent writer, loads of choices, loads of colour choices, loads of nibs choices. Easy to take the nib out and clean if you want to. The demonstrator nature means you can see the ink there swirling around. Just look at that. This has got an orange ink in it, obviously, because it's an orange body. Quite a nice pen. I do find the section to be a bit on the thin side. Again, this is very personal because I hold mine right down the bottom. If you hold it further up, it might not be too bad. And it's a smallish nib. I believe the nib's made for them by Yule. But let's write with it. So we've got here a Twsbi Eco. This has got a fine nib. Cost-wise, again, varies slightly. I can buy it in Australia for 60 Aussie dollars. Or I can buy it from the UK for 65. Different story than the others where the UK price was cheaper. I do sometimes struggle though getting pens from Australia. They don't seem to have a lot of stock. So you've got to bear everything in mind. It's really difficult to decide where to buy from. The ink, it's by Oster. And it's got this really good name. It's called Orange. Orange ink, orange pen, looks really nice. Line variation, so no pressure, with pressure. Darker colour, but not so much of a wider line. None with, none with, none and with. We'll move the mic for the sentence. This is a lot scratchier, but it's a fine nib, got to bear that in mind. You can really feel the tactileness of it. I love the feel of this. I'm not that much into fine nibs, but when I'm after a fine nib, this is one I reach for. It's so nice. Even though it's, one of my lesser costly pens is a nice way to put it, isn't it? And even though this is a lot more money, as a starter pen, I actually think it's a good option as long as the person using it is happy to use bottled ink. Cannot take cartridges. Be aware of that. The mechanism, I'm not going to work it. You twist this cap here. That pushes this plunger down. You dip the nib, dip the bottom of the pen into the ink. Twist the cap. It draws the ink up into this body. It's a very utilitarian pen. There's nothing exciting about the shape. It's just essentially what it is. It's a round tube that sucks ink up and lets it out in a controlled manner. It's still nice. As I say, lovely feedback. So that was the Twsbi Eco. Just going to move this page down ever so slightly. A little bit of all them on there. Now, before I fetched all the pens back in for one final look, I do have a couple of other pens which are good to consider as starter pens. There are reasons though why I didn't include them. The first one is this Parker Jotter. You can get this for about 34 Aussie dollars. They've been making them for years. It's got a small nib on it. It's got a very thin section. Really need to use it posted. Nice to use posted. It's a cartridge converter. I've got in here a converter. Now, the only reason I didn't include this, I had to pull the nib and feed out a few weeks ago to give it a good clean. I'd had a shimmer ink, so when I use shimmer inks, I like to completely disassemble the pen so I can get rid of any lingering shimmer particles. So I was merrily stood over the sink, cleaning it away, pulled out the nib. It went down the sink. And I thought to myself, oh dear. Well, I didn't exactly think that, but that's the polite version. And I thought, that means I can't use this pen anymore. But I was wrong. What I've actually done is I've put on here a Kaweco nib. And this is a double broad Kaweco nib. So there is some ink in here. So I'm just going to put here Parker Jotter. Really love writing with this. Why it's not included, it doesn't have that Parker nib on it. That's why I thought it's not fair to compare it against all the others. Otherwise, this would have been in the list. The other pen, now this I don't have any ink in. This is a Pilot Metropolitan. Japanese pen. Good sized pen. Again, cartridge converter. Now I can't remember with this one if the converter came with it. I know there was a cartridge, but I think I had to buy the converter separately. You can now buy them in packs where it's got the converter with it. Reason I didn't include this, when I was doing my searching for a pen with some equivalent prices, I could only find it on one site. All the other sites I looked at had virtually every other Pilot pen but this one. The one I did find it on it was $40 Aussie, and yes, it came with a converter, but it came with a squeeze one. I like this. I think this is the Con 40. I might be wrong with the name of it. But the other ones that came with, it was like a silicon sack with a couple of metal strips, and you squeeze it and let it go, and that sucks the ink up. And that was $40. I didn't include it because there was only that one site, so it's not something that you could readily get. Now, I believe there's a couple of other Pilot pens that are very similar. You know, so you've got the Kakuno, you've got the Plumix, and I think there's one called the Pilot Explorer. I did think about including the Kakuno, but when I thought about it, I thought when I looked at all these other pens, they were all better as starter pens. So the Pilot Metropolitan would have loved to add it on, but again, because I've struggled finding anywhere which sold it, I didn't think it was fair to add on. So the starter pens I'm recommending, these are just based on the pens that I own. There are loads of other ones out there. Platinum Preppy, Fountain Pen Revolution Darjeeling, the Lamy Safari, the Kaweco Sport, and the Twsbi Eco. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. What are your thoughts on these pens? Do you have any other pens that you think could be included? Please drop your comments down below. Let's kickstart the conversation. Please hit the thumbs up button. Every time you like, every time you comment, just helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.